lot of familiar faces tonight, but as with many of our recent programs, I'm also seeing a lot of unfamiliar faces. So welcome to our facility. This community education room is brand new for us, so we started to bring our programs right here to our home base in the museum and at the society. If you are not aware of our other programs, you're not a member, I encourage you to sign up. We have a sign up for email and contact information card at the back. We have sample newsletters you're welcome to take and get a sense of all the programs and services that we offer. So again, thank you for coming this evening. I want to make sure my keynote is here. Tonight we are welcoming Mr. Brian Kreider, whose credits, they're very extensive. I mean, he's going to have to go in on everything that he's done, but essentially he came to be associated with the society through his, I guess I'd call them docudramas and documentaries on the history and the local context of our community. This one, most notably, What Would Mr. Hershey Say? Some of the interviews were filmed on site here in the society. Basically followed an overview of looking at modern day history. What would Mr. Hershey say about the evolution of his town? So we're very proud to support this project. As well, we're proud to support the project of the Blue-Eyed Six because obviously it's relative local history, but the fact that it's a documentary and now potentially a Hollywood drama that's evolving based on history is very important to us, the retelling of history and how that fits into the bigger picture. So, Brian, if you will please entertain us with your long list of credits so that we can know how you're associated with the Society in Hershey, we'd be pleased. Everybody, please welcome Mr. Brian Kreider.
I thought you said expensive credits. No, extensive credits.
Yeah.
Expensive. How many of you have ever heard of the Blue-Eyed Six? Raise your hand. Oh, okay. We have a following. Just briefly, the Blue-Eyed Six, for those who don't know the story, I'll be brief, but it's the tale, actually a true story that took place back in 1878 in Indiantown Gap, back in the days of horses and wagons and mules only, and bicycles. But imagine nothing but horses, no cars, no trucks. But when the railroads came, boy, oh boy, that was something. And so when the railroad between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh would make stops at a place called Harrisburg or Lebanon or St. Joseph Springs, somebody might have left a newspaper folded up in the seat of a train car. Maybe that newspaper found its way into the Brant Hotel, which was a major stop for travelers. Back in the days in the 1800s and the 1700s, those who know history know that from Philadelphia points west and north, about every 20, 25, 30 miles, they built taverns. Because travelers would be on horseback and they could do maybe 20 miles in a day and, be put up for the night at a tavern. That doesn't mean they sat there and drank on the bar stool. That means they had a place to stay overnight and wake up the next morning early and start traveling again. So the Brand Hotel was that kind of a place. And it being in St. Joseph Spring, there wasn't a lot of employment around. There weren't many jobs. Almost like today in a way. There are not that many jobs around with skill sets that we all have and had. So back in those days, if you weren't a doctor or a lawyer, what did you do? These guys worked on railroads, building railroad ties, and worked in the mines in Pennsylvania, which is what they did. But in St. Joseph Spring, which is outside of north of Lebanon, a small village, the people were very poor, extremely poor. And when somebody dropped off a newspaper and it said something about a new business called life insurance, boy, oh boy, here's our chance to make a fortune. And so about four fellas that used to frequent the Brant Hotel got together frequently and decided, hey, this life insurance business is really something. See an old man walking down the hill there, he doesn't have long to live. Let's insure him. And when he goes, we'll get a lot of money. So four men at the Brand Hotel in St. Joseph Spring back in about summer of 1878 Might have been late spring, but maybe about this time. They began taking out insurance policies. Took out numerous policies. There were numerous insurance companies springing up all over the place like weeds. They took out policies on old Joseph Raber, who lived up the hill from where they lived in an old miner's hut with an earthen floor. Imagine living in a hut, your floor is ground. You threw a rug on that ground just for something to stand on. Remember, these people are very poor. So they insured old Joe Raber with numerous policies. And they waited around for him to die. And he didn't. So they got tired of paying the premiums on the insurance policies. So they said, well, we don't want to do that. We don't want to kill somebody. Let's find somebody else to do that. So they found two other rogues. One of them was very young, only 19 years old, named Frank Stickler. Another one was the oldest in the group, named Charles Drews. Charles Drews had 11 children. 11 children and no money. So those two, they lined up and they were promised about $300 to do away with old Joe Raber. And so you have 4 men at the Brand Hotel named George Zeckman, Israel Brandt, who owned the hotel, Henry Wise, and Josiah Hummel. Those 4 conspired to take out insurance policies on old Joe Raber, and they turned their cheek, and hopefully the old man would somehow disappear, die, maybe collect some money. So the policies totaled out to be about $8,000, and that was a lot of money in 1878. So as the story goes, old Joe Raber was taken across a plank on a cold December night, a little darker than this, and he never made it across the plank. Indiantown Creek in the Indiantown Gap was about 20 inches deep, and that was where he had his last days. So no one really saw what was going on, but the youngest of the group, I told you, was Frank Stickler, 19 years old. He made sure that old Joe Raber stayed under that water. Got on top of him, held him down. And he and Charles Drews were the ones that did the dirty deed, ran back to the house. By that time it was dark. But that was enough for the law. That was enough for the insurance companies. They wanted to make an example. Because remember, insurance is brand new. And the Insurance Commission from Harrisburg was saying, you have got to make an example of these outlaws, or else everybody's going to start to cash in on this business. And we don't want people making money. We want to make the money. The insurance industry. So, you have a way to play? What I want to do is show you the background video we put together for the Blue-Eyed Six, and then it'll pause a bit, and I'll tell you about what we did back on May 22nd, 2011, when we shot one day behind the scenes in Lebanon in an alley at the farmer's market. So right now you'll see just a little bit of a background we did. We'll talk about the Blue-Eyed Six. Who's got the lights?
In the spring of 1880, in a small hamlet of Lebanon, Pennsylvania, an event occurred that brought trainloads of newspapermen into town. These ravenous reporters smelled a story they knew would draw hundreds of readers to their front pages. A gang of thieves from the nearby hills had dabbled in something they and the rest of the country knew very little about: life insurance. Now they were on trial for their own lives. Their get-rich scheme had turned wicked when the old man they had insured was found floating in the icy waters of Indiantown Creek north of Lebanon. Though they exclaimed their innocence, and the only eyewitness himself had been part of a prior plot to drown the old man, their motive for murder was clear enough. From the courthouse to the gallows, crowds of curiosity seekers clamored to get a glimpse of mountain monsters with like piercing blue eyes. A reporter from New York City dubbed them the Blue-Eyed Six. And this true story became lodged in the annals of Pennsylvania legal history as the case that changed the insurance laws forever. A documentary film of the Blue-Eyed Six was made in 2007 and sold out theaters in Anvil, Erie, Reading, Pittsburgh, and the Poconos.
Lebanon isn't that far from Gettysburg, and it wasn't much more than a decade and a half where you had the carnage at Gettysburg. And part of the Blue-Eyed was in the Civil War. He was in the Union Army. And what that man must have seen, getting rid of an old man like Joe Raber would have been like throwing away an old chair.
It's a fascinating a microcosm of the things that were happening in this country at that time. And we too often forget that this was post-Civil War with all of the chaos and deaths that had produced and the angers that had produced.
I think a murder like what happened in the Blue-Eyed Six ripples through history. And I think it resonates through an area and through a culture and a climate. I think that's why the Blue-Eyed Six is still such a well-known incident and a historical episode in Lebanon County. I think the people in Lebanon County, I think the people anywhere could relate to this story.
Well, the Blue-Eyed Six definitely shows the way the country was at that time. People had to take care of themselves. There were no safety nets. The Blue-Eyed Six very much is really portraying history as it was then, not only just for the insurance industry, but how people lived.
Law enforcement didn't want to go into those parts. They really didn't. I think they drew the line when a man was killed, somebody had to step up and do something, and somebody finally did.
Impoverished people sometimes act desperately in order to meet their survival needs. These people were desperate in terms of trying to get money.
We've all got a little bit of bad in us, a little bit of evil in us. Depends on whether we give way to it and under pressures.
When men like Israel Brandt and Henry Wise were going without, I think that they felt a moral justification to take from those who had more.
Some of the members of the Blue-Eyed Six would go out and steal food for survival, not to make money on that. And when the crime came, when the chance to make money, no doubt, on life insurance, when that came about, hey, this is a golden opportunity that we could make a couple $100 on there, or $1,000 on a life insurance policy.
Having an insurable interest means that you have some legal angle as to why you should be able to take out this contract as either an owner of property, as an employer, or in the case of life insurance, being a relative and having some relationship with this person other than just a financial interest. Because unfortunately, the way the insurance laws were written in 1880, what they did was they created what is known as a moral hazard.
The effect was it changed the laws of the insurance in the entire United States. In fact, to this day, you must have an insurable interest.
So anybody could purchase insurance on another person with a logical answer. And the answer the Blue-Eyed Six had was, we're going to take care of this poor old man, Joe Raber. We're going to give him a decent burial. We're going to provide for him in his lifetime. But they knew he was an old man, and they knew his life expectancy wasn't that great.
Their assumption was he was going to die soon. He was old, reprobate of sorts, and he couldn't possibly live too long. And he just made the mistake of living a little longer than he should have.
only the 6 of them know for sure what really happened. And I think it would be interesting to tell this story on film. It would make great cinematography. I think the gallows scene itself would be a riveting 20-25 minutes on the big screen.
There's a subplot here besides the murder, and that is that one of the Blue-Eyed Six was named Frank Stickler, the young one, got involved with a young married woman, Lena Peters. And I guess the way the story goes, that the husband, Joseph Peters, was away serving in the army, and while he was away, his wife, young, beautiful Lena Peters, had an affair with young Frank Stickler. And if they hadn't had that affair, who knows, maybe they wouldn't have been caught, maybe there'd be no Blue-Eyed Six.
The affair between Lena Peters and Frank Stickler probably was, the biggest, I guess, proponent in what made it a story. I mean, if they wouldn't have had the affair, would revenge have been sought, and would they have had to make a story out of it? I mean, or would it just have kind of fallen into the hills of Central PA and no one would have talked about it again?
They were the catalyst for the whole story. So right there you have two very important ingredients, and they're young and they're attractive, and people just love, an audience loves people behaving badly. That just sells. That's human nature. And that's why Frank Stickler and Lena Peters' characters are the ones we have to really take a close look at and sell to Hollywood.
This true story of the Blue-Eyed Six has something in it for everyone. Romance, mystery, intrigue, and murder. We're very eager to do a feature film about this story, but we need your help. Thank you.
Preparation for filming began early on the morning of Sunday, May 22nd, 2011. We had met with Lebanon Mayor Sherry Capello and Police Chief Dan Wright, who saw the opportunity to bring potential tourist attention to the city to promote a famous event of local history. The local police department closed 8th Street between Chestnut and Cumberland and provided retired officers as security detail. Our PR manager, Jack Cantwell, had orchestrated local media. Both Channel 27 Harrisburg and Channel 43 York ran segments on their early and late news of the day. The idea for the scene was based on an actual event that took place on that cold November day in 1879, when the first two of the Blue-Eyed Six, Frank Stickler and Charles Drews, were hanged. Casting for this scene was done 2 weeks prior to filming, with open call auditions held at Lebanon Picture Frame above the Lebanon Farmers Market. Michael Lasorchik, Ian Bonner, and Brian Kreider conducted the casting call.
The Blue-Eyed Six were a group of Lebanon County men convicted of killing their neighbor in 1879 for insurance money. The producers...
Advertising one article concurrently in the Lebanon Daily News and the Merchandiser brought nearly 100 people to the market on a Saturday morning. Some stood in line well before the designated start time. We were fortunate to have costumer Karen Galata join us. She brought complete outfits as well as single components to clothe the actors. Karen and her mother, Joan Gondor, had worked with us on the documentary film, and both had knowledge and capable inventory to handle the demands of the day. Our crew was made up of recent Temple University film graduates, as well as some local filmmakers with whom we had worked before, such as Mark Myers of Smokey Roberts Productions in Lancaster, and Art Claggett and Dave Beard of Simone Associates in Lebanon. Bill Simone was the talent behind the camera with an eye for expressive detail, necessary in making an historic film. His company also generously provided the film equipment, including a digital cinema camera called the Red One, plus a dolly and track, a crane on which to mount the camera, and various lighting and grip equipment. Film industry professionals recognize that controlled camera moves bring added production value to a project. What the crane and dolly do is provide a psychological effect using calibrated moves that take the viewer in and out of the comfort zone, heighten tension, or otherwise arouse some dynamic of emotion. The scene you were watching unfold was the body of young Frank Stickler, having just been cut down from the gallows, being delivered to his father on the back of a buckboard. In true life, crowds followed the wagon all the way out 8th Street as it slowly departed Lebanon for Indiantown Gap, to Stickler's family garden, marked for nearly 100 years by a few garden stones. Often, when shooting on a real location, problems arise, especially if, in this case, a 19th century period film was being made. We couldn't show streetlights, signs, electric overhead wires, modern door and spouting fixtures, macadam paving, cement sidewalks, and, of course, cars. The solution was to mask it all by way of a giant green screen. The production crew built a large frame to hold the green material. The frame was then positioned at the end of the alley to cover anything we couldn't dress to look like 19th century. Of course, there were challenges like the wind and the light. Shooting in an alley, the window of natural light was limited. The sun would make a short appearance and then disappear. The crew set up a white scrim that went from the rooftop of one building across the alley to another building. This diffusion evened the harsh sunlight and made it softer, avoiding heavy shadows. As luck would have it, most of the day was overcast, which was actually ideal. Later, during the editing stage, the green screen was replaced by a matte painting by digital artist Robert Cornelius of Simone Associates. Editor Dave Beard worked several hours to achieve a near-flawless match between the real buildings in the alley and the referenced images provided by the Lebanon County Historical Society. To further comply with history and the integrity of the times, we sought mules instead of horses. Because we filmed on a Sunday, our Amish contacts couldn't help us. The State Equine Association then put us in touch with a man on the Maryland border who brought his mules to Lebanon for the filming. With the workday starting at 5 a.m., by noon the cast and crew were a little hungry. With the help of a caterer, we fed cast, crew, security, and any other friends who stopped by. After lunch, more singular shots of townspeople were accomplished. We released the mules and their handlers, grateful for them making the trip and adding another element of true history to the coming attraction of the feature film, The Blue-Eyed Six.
Quiet, please. That's it. Background. Action.
Exploration had begun into attaching major players, including a Hollywood director and more experienced producers. Feature film director Rowdy Harrington, a native of Pittsburgh, had met Brian Kreider back in 2002 at the Three Rivers Film Festival. The two had stayed in touch, and when the Kreider twins sent him a copy of their documentary, Harrington expressed interest to direct the feature film. With Rowdy's background working with actors like Sarah Jessica Parker, Bruce Willis, Cuba Gooding Jr., and Tom Berenger, the stage is set to attract stars to the Blue-Eyed Six. What it takes, according to Rowdy, is a producer like Kim Dawson, who worked with Rowdy on the film Bobby Jones' Stroke of Genius. Good producers work hard to attach key talent, negotiate with agents, and find experienced investors. Kim secured actor James Caviezel for Bobby Jones. Caviezel's credits include playing the role of Jesus in Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ.
Kim Dawson has been working on this story for almost 13 years now, trying to bring Bobby Jones' life to the screen. And it was very clear to me right away that this was a passion project for Kim. You go into an interview hoping that you have an opportunity to do the work, and you come out of the interview, if you get the job, with the sense of dread that now you have to deliver. And the real challenge for me in looking at this story was how good a character Bobby Jones really was. And how do you make a story out of somebody that is that exemplary?
Rowdy came to us and he said, basically, this is my movie.
and he had an incredible passion for it. He was very convincing, and it was in his eyes. We knew right away that he had the passion to make this movie.
Jim is in the foreground with a three-wood spoon heading this way.
In the world that we live in, it's so seldom that we encounter people who care as much as Rowdy cares. He dedicated himself to this project from day one. He would run from the playback cart to the set where he'd give direction and then run back to watch the monitor. Here we go! On golf courses where you're fighting elements and huge crowds of people and other things, it was arguably the most ambitious thing that any of us had ever done. And that said, Rowdy was up for the task.
It's clearly his passion and the story that he needs to tell. And he gets to write it and he gets to direct it. And that kind of intensity and devotion certainly rubs off on us.
He's a giving man and he's encouraging and so when we had questions, I definitely felt like I could absolutely go to him and say, you know, what about this or what about that? And he was always great about it.
He's a teacher. He literally is a teacher. I felt like I'm always learning, and he was able to give me a lot of that out there to make me a better actor.
I got a call that Jim had read the script and was interested in Bobby Jones, and I said, let's hire him. I mean, let's go. He had just played, Christ in Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ, and this was a character that he could relate to, coming off of that role, which I'm sure was a profound experience for him. When you make a period film, part of your job is to get the audience to go there, to suspend their disbelief, and you want to transport them to that time.
Because of getting well-known actors on board, the script for the play and the documentary is not suitable. The major difference is the dialogue. Actors will demand more lines. The script has to be attractive to stars now and not just historians. We feel no matter which direction the feature film takes, whether we do it ourselves locally or with Hollywood talent, making the Blue-Eyed Six into a feature film will create an immense economic stimulus to central Pennsylvania. According to the tracking formula used at the majority of state and municipal film offices, movies that shoot most of their scenes outside of the studios spend about a third of their budgets on location. The budget for Girl Interrupted, filmed here in 1999, was $26 million. They stayed for 6 months. They spent money in restaurants, hotels, caterers, car dealers, utilities, tolls, gasoline, wages, and taxes. The Blue-Eyed Six is a period film. That means a good portion of the location budget will be spent on concealing anything modern like streets, signs, vinyl siding, cars, lights, and power lines. At least $200,000 will be spent on modified construction alone. That means jobs. An attractive aspect that is unique to central Pennsylvania is the Amish Mennonite culture, which is ingrained throughout the surrounding area in the form of all things Pennsylvania Dutch. Film distribution companies are well aware that moviegoers outside our region continue to be fascinated by what they perceive as a quaint culture that we simply take for granted. So we made a movie trailer in Pennsylvania Dutch with English subtitles.
I have to warn you, there's some graphic shots in this.
Hel, de Peter wat is gedoe. Vertel van die insurance clear. Ja, maar Henning get short. Zo was. We hebben familie als Essamus. Hel, de Charlie zei je, nou. Zijn winsknochen am Sokler voor vlees te krijgen. Aber eens van zijn dochter, die Lina, had sie aufgeschlossen houden. Sie sind wie geschlechtliche Hase, sollen zwei. Wenn sie und die Frau Stichler gefangen wurden, kann man nicht sagen, was ihre Mann deed tun. Doch, nimmer gibt Acht voor die oude Reber, als dat nog in zijn huisje woont. Geen Buddha, geen Esser. Had alle dag diezelfde kleder geworden. Had zich net gewaschen. Du hast den Riecher kennen, wanneer die Barik nu nog gekommen is. Waar had gedacht, als aan zo lang leven deed? We worden niet van woorden. Zo, ik heb gekeerd als aan een Griek versaffen is. Aber kaum. Nou, we rijden. Ik hoop.
As you can see, a great deal of talent, determination, resources, and yes, luck go into making a feature film. And of all the byproducts and benefits, certain films also bring sustainability. 27 years after the filming of Witness, visitors still tour the Lancaster County film locations. The impact of the Blue-Eyed Six feature film will not only provide jobs, it will also sustain the rich heritage found here in central Pennsylvania.
Can I just have a light, just one? What you're about to see is the actual culmination of that one-day shooting in Lebanon, May 22nd of last year. It started at 5 o'clock in the morning, I mean, started working at 5, and we finished just before it rained. So we were lucky in that respect. This is the scene that was covered in the newspaper, where we had lots of extras. We had people assigned to makeup. We had the mules come in from the Maryland border. We had lots of expense, catering, feeding all those people, and just trying to keep everybody's spirits up. That's often a difficult assignment, because sometimes, especially in a movie where you have actors, the two leading actors or three leading actors might be working very hard, and everybody else is standing around. And that happens in making a movie. When when the John Travolta movie came to Harrisburg, it was called Lucky Numbers. Do you remember that back in 2000? When it was about the lottery fix in Pittsburgh. They shot that in Harrisburg when I was the film commissioner for Governor Ridge. And I remember going over to an insurance building on the West Shore in Enola. I think it was Enola, maybe it was another west of the river town. Anyway, we turned it into Channel 27, WTPA. That's what it was called back in the 80s. It's now something else, I guess WHTM. But it was then WTPA. So we dressed it to be WTPA. We put big signs up, WTPA, and that's where Lisa Kudrow drove her Plymouth Duster into the plate glass window. I was there for that whole scene, and then she comes out of the building with a shopping bag full of ping pong balls that were weighted with white paint. Because that's how they figured out they could beat the lottery. You know, they weighted the balls with paint except for 3. And those 3 popped up. That's how the guy won the lottery. So it took from 9 o'clock that night when they started filming to 3 in the morning just to get Lisa Kudrow coming out of the building with the shopping bag, with the ping pong balls, with the white paint in most of the balls, and then she trips, stumbles, and the balls roll under a car, and she picks up the balls, puts them back in the bag. It took 6 hours for that scene. That one scene. So what I was getting at is, she's busy, the director's busy, the assistant director's busy, the lighting person's busy, and everybody else is standing around the soup kitchen, waiting to say, okay, we're done now. Believe me, it's like watching paint dry if you're not involved. It's very tough. But that's just the nature of the business. I forgot to mention earlier that there's a part of this to deal with Rowdy Harrington, who is a big director from Hollywood. The reason Rowdy's segment is in here is because we're doing an event on the 30th of March at the Allen Theater, trying to get investment people interested in the making of the film, and to bring people up to date about what we're doing. And what we're doing is we're we're attaching a director from Hollywood, Rowdy Harrington, who's had experience directing major talent, major actors, who really likes the story of the Blue-Eyed Six. And the idea, if we get Rowdy Harrington attached to the story, he then can get other actors that we can't get. You know, if I directed the documentary. If I direct the feature film, say we get somebody as important as what, Ryan Gosling, is it? He's going to say, "What have you done before?" And I'm going to say, "I did the documentary." He said, "See you later." So we got to get somebody who's much bigger and has experience working with actors and knows their temperament, because there is a temperament. So that's why Rowdy Harrington's section is in here, because he's coming. We're bringing him in to the Allen Theater to talk to the crowd on the 30th about getting behind this film and helping us. Any questions before we finish this? This is the actual scene. It's an opening scene that we filmed that you saw behind the scenes, all the preparation for. And after 14 hours, this is the end result. So go ahead. Lights. Railroads, real big in those days. I'd like to introduce Ian Bonner, who's with me, associate producer in the documentary. Ian, stand up, please. Ian helped a great deal with the documentary, something in the feature, and you involved in the play too? Yeah. We did the play back in 1993, 94, 95, I guess 96. We were at the Hershey Theater in 96 with the play, The Blue-Eyed Six. We sold it out for a weekend at the Hershey Theater, and I guess that seats about 1,900 people. And I know that that there was some trouble in the balcony at the Hershey Theater because we had a lot of people from Perry County coming because they heard there was a hanging. And they wanted to see a hanging on stage. So there was like some arguing and going over, "That's my seat. No, that's my seat." You know? But that was at the Hershey Theater back in 96. I should have said something, but when this wagon was going in, wow, I can't. The sky, if you notice, the sky was no longer green. The back of that alley was a bright green, like this shirt right there. Your shirt. That was the color of the screen behind the alley, and the idea is that electronically drops away when you put a picture there, but you got to sew up all the edges. Real time-consuming electronic artwork that he had to do in the edit session to put that shot in there of the sky and the buildings. So that's what's called digital art. I'd like to say hello and recognize Jason Ader, who was my Romeo and Juliet at the Hershey Area Playhouse. Jason is making his own films as well, so thank you for coming. Anybody else have any questions? about the story or about the making of or about the film, about... yes? In the back?
So how much did that cost for that one day in Lebanon? $500,000.
Huh? 5,000.
5,000.
Yes. The insurance alone was what, over 1,300?
Yeah, just to insure the whole.
Right. And it was double expensive because we had mules that could talk.
They were great. They were sisters, actually. We put them on the call.
I didn't say that. You said that.
They had names. We put them on the call sheet.
The mules had names.
What was, I forget what they were. It's on the call sheet.
Buttermilk and Trigger.
And we actually had a human stand in for a mule at one point. Remember we had a big guy?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
He was so big that we needed somebody to stand in.
We dismissed the mules and we weren't done shooting, so we had to get a big guy to carry his wagon. He wasn't in the shot. But, so the idea is we'd like to go from the play to the documentary to now a feature film. And to make a feature film around here, you either go locally or you try to do what we're doing and try to bring in Hollywood talent and try to make, try to pull a rabbit out of a hat, pretty much. Yes?
Did they hang all 6 of them, or only the one that we saw in the documentary?
No, the first hanging they did was this depiction here was November 14th, 1879. They hanged Frank Stickler and Charles Drews, the youngest and the oldest. I don't want to get into gruesome details, but the old man, Drews, died instantly, and the younger one did not, unfortunately. But,
What about the other 4?
The other 4, and this is one of the reasons why this survives generations and generations, because there's books been written about this, about the possible injustice that happened. The other 4 had really, did they have knowledge of the murder? All of them? No one really knows, but one of them did get acquitted. George Zekman was acquitted. After this first hanging in November of 1879, they hanged 3 more in May of 1880. And the one, Henry Wise, he was buried at Greenpoint. You know where Greenpoint is? Indian Town Gap? There was a church there that burned down, but the cemetery's still there. And his tombstone's still there. The thing about Henry Wise is he's the one that threatened to come back from the dead and haunt the area because of the injustice. He claimed he had no idea that the old man was going to be drowned. And so what they did was, and this is a true story, they kept his coffin above ground for 2 weeks. And in those days they had like a glass window. And they had, I guess, you've heard of those sightings in the newspaper where they say, we see the Virgin Mary on this rock or this tree, and people come from miles around. Well, back then, the news spread that his eyes were open. So, it's a true story that on the road to Indian Town Gap from Lebanon, it was like 2,000 visitors came to see his face. And, of course, they figured, I guess, that teenagers were fooling around and somehow opened his eyes. But I don't want to scare you anymore. George Zekman was acquitted, the other 3 were hanged, so 5 out of 6 were hanged. And the injustice, according to those who defend the other 3, was that, and Judge Gates, I don't know if you remember Judge Gates from Lebanon. He wrote a book called The Hangings of Lebanon County, or that's what it was called. Yeah, in that book he says that if this were held today, there wouldn't even be a murder conviction because the evidence was so sketchy. Nobody really saw it. The eyewitness, his wife was fooling around with the youngest of the 6, and he made sure that he saw the 2 men running up from the creek, so he nailed those 2, and that was good enough for the courts. Don't forget, this was 1880. This wasn't today. To get an appeal, you had to kind of be in Philadelphia or New York. Out in the country, hey, you did something bad, you know, that's how we keep in line.
Did Judge Gates have a part in the play back at Lemon?
Yes, he did. We just felt that he had such talent, we made him the reporter. And what he did was he typed on the edge of the stage while we changed the scenes. And the spotlight went on Judge Gates, and he would sit there and type like he's doing a story for the newspaper. And he enjoyed it very much. Any other questions? Don't be afraid.
We went to that play, but I'm trying to remember where we put it on.
I was working for TNT in Atlanta, and my brother Bruce was up here, and so my mother, she cast the play back in 1993. She and my brother pretty much decided who was going to be in it. Wave your hand, Mom. We put it on at the Old State Theater in Lebanon in 93, 94.
94.
May of 94. And then we put it on at the Gretna Chautauqua Playhouse. And there were lines of people all the way down to the parking lot. And then we put it on again the next summer at the Gretna Playhouse and the
Hershey Theater and back to Gretna.
Then the Hershey Theater,
Right.
and then back to Gretna.
2 shows in Hershey.
Right. Yeah.
It was almost a riot outside the box office. The number had shut down, remember? The Hershey Park, who was handling tickets for us? One of the outlets in town.
It was before Giant Center was built.
Right. So they were handling it, and for some reason they stopped, so people had to come in person to get their tickets. So that morning there was a line going around the block to get the remaining tickets. So 4,000 people saw that show that day. One single day. That was crazy.
This is a case that you heard it said here that I don't know that it changed the entire insurance industry's laws. What it did was it's cited in most legal references, and I know we have a lawyer in the audience. She's looking around. But it's often cited as the premier case of what was called graveyard insurance, which was an abuse of life insurance, that you could take a policy out on a stranger. And that's what happened in this case.
People that were from Jonestown and around there, had people that were buried. Are they still there in Tombstone?
Tombstones are still, yeah. Henry Wise is buried at Greenpoint. There's a place called Saturn at the Meeting House at the Gap, and that's where Zeckman and Hummel are buried. Brandt, the guy with the beard that looks like Tom Selleck on here. Brandt was a tavern owner. He's buried along with Charles Drews because they were both veterans. He's buried at Mount Lebanon. And Frank Stickler, the youngest, who we depicted being carried to his father in the back of the wagon, he's buried. He was buried in his parents' garden at Indiantown Gap. Imagine that wagon must have taken all day, you know, to get out to Indiantown Gap. What a solemn. You know, I mean, obviously, you know, he murdered an old man. He needed to pay for that crime, but it was pretty brutal. The law was pretty brutal. Question? All right, so you all want to be in the hanging scene? Is that the? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We do have 6 of these DVDs. If anyone's interested, they're $20 a piece. Or you can get them cheaper at the Historical Society next week.
Thank you so much,
Right.
Brian. A big round of applause for Brian. Thank you so much for coming, and please join us for refreshments. You guys were a very tolerant group. Thank you for joining us while we worked through all the kinks and starting to have programs here.